who destroys who? Two US warships intercept two Iranian warships loaded with powerful missiles. Two US warships have just found some Iranian warships loaded with missiles, and it seems they're ready for war. Why would not one, but two warships be loaded with powerful missiles? Could Iran be marching towards war with the United States? Join us as we explore how two US warships intercepted two Iranian warships loaded with powerful missiles. Imagine coming in contact with enough missiles to send the whole country to ruins. That's what the United States Navy found at sea on these Iranian warships. Now, this has become a serious issue between both countries, based on the fact that Iran and the United States have maintained a strained relationship for decades. Both countries have been at loggerheads since the Iranian Revolution in 1979, and tensions have been growing between them ever since. With this recent discovery of two Iranian warships loaded with missiles, the US military is not taking this lightly. How did the US Navy find these warships in the first place? According to a statement from the US Central Command, which oversees military operations in the Middle East, it all began when the US Navy SEALs found and seized Iranian-made missile parts on a boat bound for Yemen's Iranian-backed Houthi militants. The boat was found near the coast of Somalia in international waters of the Arabian Sea, and in it were several Iranian-made ballistic missiles and cruise missile components. Other parts like propulsion, warheads, and guidance for Houthi medium-range ballistic missiles and anti-ship cruise missiles were found on this vessel. The SEALs boarded a traditional dhow sailing vessel near the coast of Somalia in international waters of the Arabian Sea, seizing Iranian-made ballistic missile and cruise missile components, including propulsion, guidance, and warheads for Houthi medium-range ballistic missiles and anti-ship cruise missiles, according to a statement from US Central Command, which oversees military operations in the Middle East. This raid made it the first seizure of advanced Iranian-manufactured cruise missiles and ballistic missile components, and the US Navy was glad to have made the interception, despite losing two SEALs during the interception. After taking control of the missile-packed vessel, the US Navy detained all the crew members found on the vessel and then proceeded to sink the ship after deeming it unsafe to leave. When Iran was questioned about this incident and the reason why weapons of mass destruction of the country's making were found on the boat, Iran denied it blatantly. As if that wasn't enough, the United Nations had to step in when the Houthi militant group, backed by Iran, attacked a ship traveling through international waters. The Maltese-flagged vessel was attacked with a missile from the Houthi militants. It sustained some damage, but thankfully no one was injured. This caused the United Nations to call Iran for questioning about the Houthi militants and how they get supplied with weapons. Still, Iran denied having such allies and arming them despite having such evidence. As a result, the UN placed a ban on arms transfers to the Houthis. But that didn't stop anything, as it wasn't the last time the US Navy intercepted a shipment filled with illegal weapons from Iran. Shortly after the ship filled with missiles was seized, a fishing boat smuggling over 2,000 AK-47 rifles from Iran was caught. The vessel, which was crewed by 6 members and sailing through the Gulf of Oman when caught, was bound for Yemen. This meant it was another delivery to the Houthi militants. But thankfully, a team from the patrol coastal ship discovered and intercepted their illegal journey. With support from another patrol ship, the USS Monsoon, and a guided missile destroyer, USS The Sullivans, the Navy forces found out that the ship was carrying 2,116 AK-47 assault rifles. While the Navy forces were astonished at this discovery, other Navy officials conducted investigations. There, they found out that the vessel was sailing through a route historically known to be used for the transfer of lethal aid to Yemen's Houthi rebels. That's a violation of the Security Council resolution and international laws set by the United States. And the US military has announced its disappointment severely about having to intercept and seize multiple weapons and instruments of mass destruction like these. The US Navy even went on to cite other multiple instances in which they have stopped several vessels shipping lethal aid from Iran to Yemen. One instance was when the US Navy intercepted a massive amount of explosive chemical material that was used to power ballistic missiles. A few weeks later, the US Navy announced again that it seized over 50 tons of rocket parts and ammunition. These moves from Iran are enough signs to show that they are breeding up something, and the Houthis' militants are being used as their tool. The United States military is aware of this, which is why they are always on the edge to make sure they stop any form of foul play from Iran. The US even goes as far as destroying some sites powered by the Houthi militants. Recently, the US forces damaged 4 Houthi anti-ship ballistic missiles that were ready to launch from Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen. According to a US defense official, he noted that this was a necessary action to take, as the ballistic missiles stood as an impending threat to US Navy ships and even merchant ships that would be sailing across that region. We can't blame this action taken by the United States Navy, because the Houthi militants have a bad reputation for consistently launching attacks on several military and commercial vessels in the Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea. A similar attack happened recently when these militants attacked both a military and commercial vessel. It happened when 2 ballistic missiles were fired from Houthi-controlled parts of Yemen in the direction of the US Navy warship as it answered a distress call from a commercial tanker in the Gulf of Aden. According to a statement from the US Central Command, the USS Mason and allied ships responded to a distress call from the commercial vessel, which reported that an unknown entity was attacking them. Immediately, the USS Mason and other ships took off to the scene and demanded the ship's release upon arrival. Almost immediately, 5 armed individuals jumped from the vessel and tried to flee with a smaller boat, but the USS Mason pursued these perpetrators until they surrendered. While all of this was going on, 2 ballistic missiles were fired from the Houthi-controlled parts of Yemen towards the USS Mason and the commercial vessel's location, but they landed 10 nautical miles away from both ships. The missiles hit the Gulf of Aden, and there was no damage or injuries reported. Shortly after that, these same Iran-backed Houthi militants attacked the US military and coalition forces by carrying out an attack using a close-ranged ballistic missile. The missiles were targeted at the Al-Assad air base in Iraq, which resulted in multiple minor injuries and some non-serious damage to infrastructure. 2 days after the attack on the airbase, the USS Thomas Hudner shot down several one-way attack drones in the Red Sea. These drones had also been launched from Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen, Central Command said. Although the militants say that these attacks are carried out due to Israel's war on Hamas in the Gaza Strip, most of these ships that are often hit usually have no links to Israel in any way. If that is their excuse, what about the other attacks on the airbase, the military vessels, and the one-way attack drones? Sometimes the Houthi militants deny these attacks, saying that they never triggered any form of attack toward the other party. Their lies were exposed when some of the missile components seized during the recent raid by the US forces included parts like those used in recent Houthi attacks. Other components included parts resembling rocket motors and even an anti-ship cruise missile's turbojet engine. Well, it's good to see that alongside the United States, some of the world's most powerful countries also have no time for these militants backed by Iran. Aside from the United States military, other countries including, but not limited to, Britain often respond to these Houthi attacks on international shipping in the Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea with a series of powerful airstrikes on Friday and Saturday designed to degrade the Iranian-backed group's capabilities severely. According to the military leaders from the United Kingdom and the US, they noted that these airstrikes hit several targets ranging from command and control nodes to munitions depots, production facilities, and launching sites for drones and missiles. At least, that is the military defending themselves, not them attacking first. Still, it does not ignore the fact that Iran and the United States are slowly drawing each other deeper into conflict with each passing day, which would not do any good to either nation in the long run. It's crazy that relations between these two countries have deteriorated to this degree. In 2015, Washington and Tehran had just agreed on a historic multilateral deal that curtailed Iran's nuclear enrichment program in exchange for the United States' sanctions relief. The deal didn't break the mistrust between the two countries or solve long-lasting disagreements about Iran's foreign policy in the Middle East. Still, it created a much-needed mechanism for diplomatic engagement, which the deal's proponents saw as important steps that should be taken to avoid a war. Trump was a largely outspoken critic of the deal on the campaign trail, and immediately after he became president, he started pressuring Tehran. For all its faults, the Trump administration seemed to understand a fact. Although Iran's nuclear program had become a focal point of US-Iranian tensions, it was never the actual reason for hostility between the two countries. The roots of those tensions cut deeper than we think. One of those roots is Iran's support for militant groups at war with Israel, such as Hamas and Hezbollah in Lebanon, and its relation with enemies of the United States Gulf allies, such as the Houthi militant group in Yemen. No less important was Iran's support for Iraqi militias that killed hundreds of US military personnel at the height of the Iraq War, and that continue to threaten US troops there. Hoping to make a change in the Islamic Republic's behavior, Trump withdrew from the deal in 2018 and embarked on a sanctions-based maximum pressure campaign. His administration presented Tehran with a list of 12 demands, most of which had to do with Iran's regional activities, with the rest relating to Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile programs. Essentially, Trump's conditions basically asked Iran to leave its grand strategy and surrender its most valuable military deterrence. In exchange, the United States promised to lift sanctions on Iran, help restore its economy, and normalize diplomatic relations. The Islamic Republic rejected the demands outrightly, then turned to Russia, China, and Europe, hoping that some or all of these actors would pressure Trump's government to take back its demands. At most, if that doesn't happen, a means of bypassing the US sanctions regime would show up. Yet Iran had apparently neither amassed enough clout nor earned sufficient goodwill to secure foreign backing against the United States. As a result, the regime was completely alone. With US sanctions starting to take their toll, Iran had no choice but to find a way out of this bind. It had three options. It could give in to US requests, or appease Washington by seeking dialogue. It could tough it out and hope that Trump would lose his 2020 re-election bid, or it could push back and raise the stakes by showing it was ready to escalate. Judging by its recent actions, the Islamic Republic seems to have picked the third option. Iran is widely believed to be responsible for an attack against commercial ships in the Gulf of Oman, and US officials have warned multiple times that Iran might be planning such a strike. Many observers had prepared that the incident would trigger a response from the US military. Instead of escalating the issue, the United States answered with calls for dialogue without preconditions. Assuming that Iran was truly responsible for the attack, the operation was a clear victory for them. By mounting a costly but non-lethal attack on civilian shipping lanes, it had diverted the United States policy from escalation to dialogue. Trump followed by asking Japan's Prime Minister, Shinzo Abe, to send a letter to Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, expressing his desire to talk. However, when Abe met with Khamenei, the letter and the offer for dialogue were summarily dismissed. Two more oil tankers, including a Japanese-flagged vessel, were attacked that same day in the Gulf of Oman. The United States again accused Iran as the culprit. They showed surveillance video from the US Navy that confirmed it. The surveillance video showed Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps personnel on board a patrol craft, removing a suspected limpet mine from one of the tanker's hulls before sailing towards the Iranian port at Bandar-e-Jask. Iran had created an opportunity for dialogue, but promptly destroyed that opportunity. Even if the US overture were insincere, as Iran's leaders initially thought, Iran never cared to test it. Appearing open to de-escalatory dialogue would have given Iran leverage with the United States and sympathy from other government bodies worldwide. Instead, Khamenei flippantly refused the off-ramp he had been offered, disgracing the prime minister of a neutral foreign power and risking open war with the United States of America by attacking civilian targets in the Gulf of Oman. Such behavior is dangerous and was not expected, given the tight boundaries Khamenei has placed for how to engage with the United States. Iran's leader has asked for a complete reversal of the Trump administration's policy, yet refuses to dialogue while sanctions are still in place. Unwilling to suffer through sanctions or compromise, Iran has only one option: to escalate and challenge the Trump administration's resolve. Keeping up with this logic, Iran went on to shoot down a US Navy surveillance drone over international waters, but they claimed it was moving over Iranian territorial waters. The choice of an unmanned target likely shows Tehran's desire to escalate within limits, but its actions still forced an American response. It was reportedly said that Trump, at the time, ordered a series of US strikes against Iranian missile and radar positions, but stopped the operation at the last minute. Instead, the United States claimed to have carried out limited cyber attacks targeting command and control nodes for Iran's missile systems. The Trump administration also announced additional sanctions on a massive financial conglomerate controlled by Khamenei and on a host of IRGC Navy commanders, and warned of possible future sanctions against Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif. Trump's response shows that Washington has become just as boxed in as Tehran. The president's policies has led the United States to the brink of an elective war with Iran, and his administration's behavior, especially the threat of sanctions against Iran's top diplomat, has undercut the sincerity of his repeated calls for talks. Sanctions seem to be the only tool the administration is comfortable with. Still, at this point, new sanctions are almost ceremonial, since the most economically damaging ones were enacted long ago. Even so, they make negotiations worse. Following the latest round of sanctions, Iranian officials announced that there was no window for diplomacy anymore. It's been years since Trump left the presidential office. Yet the tensions between the United States and Iran keep going higher and are at the brink of war. Do you think the Biden administration could fix this? Or a war between Iran and the United States is not inevitable at this point? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below.